Hey YouTube, it is officially 1 week into the season, and so what I'm going to do is go over early like tier list rankings and then early risers and early fallers. Uh, so you know moving forward, like Great League is done as of today, like well I guess tomorrow is league turnover, tomorrow afternoon. We're going into Ultra League and a Spring Cup, and Great League will be back in a couple weeks. So instead of just going over like another team, which I have plenty of those, I'll save those for 3 weeks from now. Uh, what you need to start looking into for 3 weeks from now, if you want to sort of invest in, if you don't have these Pokemon built, what to invest in. So the question is early risers, early fallers, top 10 to 15 Pokemon. Um, let's do early risers first, early fallers, and then I'll do like a top 10 to 15 tier list at the ending. I'll try and timestamp below. Um, I think there's two, off the top of my head for sure, there's two typings that are rising. Let's just start with the dragons. The amount of, I know everyone was testing Gudra, that's fine. But if you saw my video yesterday afternoon, I think in like the 9 battles that I showcased, I led against Shadow Dragonair 5 times. And the amount of Hackmos I've seen, because Brick Break got a buff, lowering your opponent's attack, is I've seen quite a lot of those. And then everyone was testing Gudra. So dragons are everywhere, and the reason the dragons are everywhere is because the very obvious, water is everywhere, right? Water is so overrepresented in this meta. This is not new. It's been overrepresented for years, and they just buffed a bunch of water Pokemon, right? They buffed. They did buff Quagsire with Aqua Tail. It is now top rank, which is annoying because I actually TN'd my Aqua Tail off, but buffed Aqua Tail makes Quagsire better here. Let me just look at the stats to why that is. Yeah. 35 energy for 79.2 damage, 2.26 damage per energy as opposed to Mud Bomb, 40 for 86.4, 2.16. So it's quicker with a higher damage per energy. Aquatail buff coming through for Quagsire. Shadow Claw coming through for Ralligator. Steel Wing, I think Empoleon's overrated. Shadow is way better though, but coming over for Steel Wing and Empoleon buffed, right? So many waters out there. So with so many waters, and then so many grass and electric trying to beat those waters, hello, what is something that resists all of those? And that's dragons, right? Resist water, resist grass, will resist electric. Is there anything else that it resists here? Fire. There's not a lot of fire. RIP Ninetales. So dragons are like a must. So the question is, which one to use? Honestly, they all play very, very similar roles and do similar things. I think Guzzlord just gives you a little more bulk, and that dark typing also helps resisting on ghosts, right? So you would resist ghosts as well, which is a bonus. So with the bulk and the resist ghosts, that is great for Guzzlord. Trade-off, you're weak to fighting, which the other ones are not. Gudra and Dragonair, basically the same. Dragon Breath, Aqua Tails, and then Power Whip versus Body Slam, very similar in stat products, so both of them I think are comparable. Hackmo gives you a little, I think probably a little less bulk. Oh no, it's 1931. It's actually decently bulky, probably even better. So Hackmo gives you the decent bulk. Dragon Claw is actually the reason that it's not as good, because Dragon Claw is not a good move, but buffed Brick Break. When I say buffed, it's still a terrible move, damage per energy, but lowering your opponent's defense at 100% of the time. So lower your opponent's defense and just have those Dragon Tails really, really chunk. It makes Hackmaw really strong. So dragons are all up. I think Guzzlord, Gudra, Dragonair, Hackmaw are all very, very strong in this meta. So if you have one of those, they're definitely worth building a team around. In terms of other Pokemon that are buffed, I think there's two, like sort of risers. Grass is an interesting one, and I'm using a Venusaur on one of my teams in which I swept multiple teams because Venusaur obviously just hitting super effective against the grass and Whiscash and Quagsire and Feraligatr everywhere, but also being able to go against Gallade. Yes, it has the Psycho Cut, but it also has Leaf Blade and Close Combat, which you resist. So Venusaur did very well with. I think Trevenant's going to be on the rise a ton too, just with like Cresselia plus all these waters. So I think grass will make a slight uptick. what helps grass is with all these waters, it's like impossible to run fire and difficult to run ice, right? So I cannot use, as much as I want to use Ninetales, I cannot use Ninetales in this meta right now. There is a million, there's a million waters. Same thing with ice. Like most ice Pokemon will have, you have some mud boys like Swampert and Quagsire and stuff, which will take neutral to ice, but otherwise ice is resisted on all these water Pokemon. So it's again, it's tough to run ice Pokemon. So when you don't have fire and you don't have ice, hello grass, right? So grass should rise. I haven't seen a ton of grass yet. Like I've barely seen Superior. I've seen a couple Trevenants. I haven't really seen any of these other grass, but I think grass probably as the season goes on should rise. Again, with Dragon rising, it makes it a little trickier to run grass, but with so much water, I think it's worth it, and that's where Trevenant is going to be even better, being able to have the claw to hit neutral. And then the other thing that I'm going to say is on the rise is Feraligatr and I'm just Gallade Pokemon. So I have put out at least Cordilli. You can argue is not a true one, but I'm put out Mantine this afternoon or yesterday afternoon. Put this out yesterday afternoon. So Mantine, I've got a Galvantula coming, and I've got Galvantula, Charjabug. These Pokemon, Electric, Bug, and Flying Water, will help you resist all, like the majority of the movesets on Feraligatr and Gallade, and be able to hit like neutral to super effective. So core breakers, so Pokemon like these that are core breakers are rising. So I think again, Galvantula and Charjabug as the Electric Bug, resisting counter, hitting super effective against water, and resisting grass and resisting fighting is huge. So those have taken an uptick. Plus there's still like Skarmories and stuff everywhere, right? So those are upticks. And then Mantine as well. I'm trying to think if there's any other core breakers that I've seen for this pairing. The only other kind of core breaker is Lickitung. And I don't want to say it's risen because it's already top ranked Pokemon, right? But it's super, super strong being able to resist the claws on Feraligatr. Again, Shadow Hydro still does over 50%, so it's not as clean there. And then doing super effective with your licks against Gallade. So you can live one close combat. So it's a nice kind of core breaker, right? So which I've seen more Lickitungs, which is why in my video yesterday I used a Raticate because it triple resists the lick. Because I think there's gonna be an uptick in like Lickitungs and Trevenant, so ghost type moves. So I use that. So I think those for the most part are the early risers. Again, I've seen some Empoleons. A lot of people just testing it out. I think Empoleon will. I think again, in terms of tier list, it's like bottom of 2, top of 3 for me. And then I think that's all that I'm seeing here. In terms of fallers, RIP Fire, right? There's really Talonflame, you can argue okay because you have that flying aspect of it. So you can like hit Gallade for super effective, and you can potentially ramp up on it on some Pokemon and at least hit neutral against dragons. But with all the waters and all the dragons and just a bad typing to start with, it's very, very, very difficult to run fire right now. And as you can see with the top ranked Pokemon 82 and 89, even Marowak got a Shadow Bone buff and it's just still below 100. It's really, really tough to run fire because you need to cover so many things. You need to cover rock, you need to cover electric, you need to cover the waters. Most of these Skelegers has got like okay bulk for being such a low Pokemon. Not even like 1840, 139 stamina though. But for the most part, your Talonflames like 1834. Again, Marowak probably around the same. Oh, 2025 for Marowak, but it's mostly in the defense and lower stamina. don't have the sort of bulk and movesets and typings to compete in the meta right now. So that is unfortunate. In terms of other Pokemon that I've seen or less of, let me just work my way down this list. I don't think there's anything that like jumps off my head. Poliwrath is an interesting one. I've still seen an okay amount of Poliwrath, but Poliwrath was on every single team, not every single team, but like the majority of teams last season. And Poliwrath is still strong. I think like with Feraligatr, it's close because it's basically claw versus counter. So that's kind of a wash. And then Gallade is very, very tough, right? So getting super resisting counters resisted, super effective with the Psycho Cut and Leaf Blade, and you're just going to get outpaced. So you're just going to get killed there. But then there's Empoleon, which will hit super effective against. There's Hippowdon, which I said don't use. That will hit super effective. So I feel like Poliwrath should still be around more. Again, it's only one weekend, so maybe people are just testing Pokemon. Maybe we'll see an uptick in Poliwrath later, but I have not seen as many as I did the first time around. And I guess anything that's just weak. So ground is an interesting one. Because when you look at ground, you see Gligar, which dominates because of its flying typing, and then a bunch of Mud Boys. So in terms of actual ground, you're not looking down until like Clodsire. And then you're going down to like Diggersby and Stunfisk down at the 80s. And I feel like because water is so prevalent, and Whiscash and all these waters, and it's just like it's tough to run in ground if it's just a pure ground. If it's not Clodsire benefits from that poison typing, but if it's not Clodsire, you'd also be weak to grass. So like Clodsire, ground, ice, water, it's just like it's so tough to use right now. So I feel like those have dropped off a bit. But maybe like if you see more dragon is just neutral, but you see more like charge bugs and electrics, then they could uptick again. But with so many waters right now, I have not seen many of these Pokemon yet, and it's tough. It's tough when everything has like, it's tough when you're against a Pokemon that can get to Hydro Cannon, a super effective, hard hitting, attack heavy Hydro Cannon in 5 Shadow Claws, right? It's really tough to run. So I think like the fires and the grounds, and maybe a bit of Poliwrath have decreased. The rest of it, again, it's probably too early to tell. Defense Deoxys is probably one I've seen less of. And again, it just gets killed from you're taking super effective Shadow Claws on Feraligatr. Your counters are resisted on Gallade. One of the main fighters now is Annihilate, which is a ghost. You still have like Sableye, Safe Swap, and so it's just like I've seen less Defense Deoxys, and I think it's still a good Pokemon. It's just kind of first look. But yeah, that's basically the Great League risers and fallers. So the question is, what is my top 10 to 15 Pokemon? So if I had to like, what do I always go back on? So let's just start with a couple that I think are just like the safe swaps. And I'm just going to organize by switches because they're very obvious on the safe swaps. Interesting that Gudra has jumped to number 6. But I think Feraligatr, actually, let me just hold Feraligatr because I want to talk about Feraligatr and Gallade separately. But Lickitung, Gligar, and I would say Sableye and Annihilate. Those 4 are still my go-to safe swaps. Lickitung, Gligar, Sableye, Annihilate. All very, very strong Pokemon in their own. All got like okay to good bulk. All have good coverage and can't get like super hard punished. The hardest is like Gligar getting punished by a Skarmory. That's the worst. But even others like Lickitung just so bulky and spammy with Licking Body Slam. Sableye even against like a fairy, those claws and returns are fine. And then Annihilate is hard hitting, plus the Shadow Ball coverage is great. So those 4 Pokemon are, in my opinion, some of the best safe swaps. We'll talk about Feraligatr and the best. I think Feraligatr should be like, if it's not Lickitung, it's Feraligatr. So those 4 are definitely my top 15 because they are so strong overall and so safe. Might as well just talk about Feraligatr now. I said it's in my top 15. Going against it 100 times, I think it's probably a top 10 Pokemon. It truly is, and you can see the score of 100 as a safe swap here. It truly does feel like the safest thing in the world. There's not really anything that will resist both claws and hydro cannon in of itself. So to have one of the best fast moves in the game with one of the best charge moves in the game, back to back with a hard hitting attack Pokemon, is very, very, very tough to deal with. And again, the the only thing that really resists the Shadow Claw are normal typings and dark. And there's no real normal typing in dark off the top of my head that can resist the hydros as well. So you're hitting at least neutral with Shadow Claw or Hydro, plus Ice Beam for coverage. It's spammy, it's hard hitting. Truly a top 10 Pokemon, and I think it should be everywhere. If you don't have one built up, I would build one up. It is very, very strong, very, very, very much worth it. So definitely in a top 10 to 15 there here. I have not used Aquatail Quagsire, but I've used my other Quagsire again, and I've used Whiscash again, and those two play the exact same as they did last season, which are top 10 Pokemon. Again, only pure weakness is grass. They're both spammy. They both got decent bulk. They both hit pretty decently hard. So they're both just super, super strong Pokemon. So I think Quagsire and Whiscash are definitely in the top there. And because I've mentioned Gallade a couple times, again, just this, you need to use Shield Advantage for it because it's very, very, very glassy. But man, 4 Psycho Cuts to a Leaf Blade and 5 to a Close Combat on a super attack heavy Pokemon is really, really, really tough to deal with, especially if you do leave Shield Advantage. And that's why a lot of people are now bringing out those Core Breakers, in particular stuff that can just resist both Leaf Blade and Close Combat. So your Flyers, your Bug Electric, these sort of things are now coming out a lot more because of Gallade. And I think Gallade is very, very strong. It can get walled by those, but even like resisted Close Combat. What did I have today? Galvantula? Yeah, I had a Galvantula go up against Gallade, and it resisted Close Combat, still did like 75%. So it just hits like a truck, right? So in terms of my top 15, I tried to use Registeel today. So Cresselia I think is top 10 to 15 Pokemon, just because of the bulk and the moveset and stuff like that. So I think Cress is an obvious one, but it's not one that I want to like. It's interesting because it's like a top 10 to 15 Pokemon, but it's not a top 10 15 Pokemon that I'm comfortable putting on my team, if that makes sense. Like I would much rather, and again, this is just my style of play, I would much rather use Lickitung. Let me just go down this list and say the 15 Pokemon that I'd rather use. Lickitung. I used Registeel today. I hated it. Did not work well. So still ranked number 3, but did not like it. Lickitung, Quagsire, Gligar. Swampert I loved using Swampert before. If there's Whiscash out there and there's Quagsire out there, I don't think there's a point of using Swampert. Honestly, I really don't like using Swampert as much. So Lickitung, Quagsire, Gligar. Skarmory's such a tricky one. Because it can wall so many Pokemon, but also get walled. But it has a lot of play. I think probably Skarmory's the top 15, but I put it like for me like at 15. For Alligator, Lantern. Did I say Whiscash already? Whiscash, Annihilate. I have not used a Azumarill this season yet, but I probably use that. Gallade. One of the dragons, either Gudra or Dragonair, are like right at 15. Poliwrath is still up there for me. And then some of the ones down here, like Sableye, Lantern, Sableye, are sort of rounding out. And then my second tier would have stuff like Umbreon on it. It would have Trevenant on it. If the dragons were at like the 15 or 16, like bottom of first, top of second, I think those are there. And then like did I say Trevenant, but like the grass Trevenant, Stunfisk, Galarian Stunfisk I put up there. Yeah, so those are essentially Carbink and Bastion are so it's so tricky to use because We have Registeel ranked at number 3. We have Carbink ranked at number 7, and we have Bastiodon ranked at number 14. And the problem is the rankings are based on analysis of your matchups against the Great League meta. But the problem is, I would argue the Great League meta, there's like the Great League meta, which is like 45 Pokemon that your matchups are run against. And then there's the Great League meta that you see, and that's like 20 Pokemon. And the problem is, those 20 Pokemon that I just mentioned are going to kill those Pokemon, right? Lickitung is the worst one, and that's still just neutral. But like Quagsire, all the Mud Boys are going to kill them. Feraligatr is going to kill it. Stealing Skarmory is going to destroy Carbink now. Sableye, like neutral across the board there. The dragons would have some problems. The dragons would, they're all those Pokemon that I mentioned would have pretty good matchups against the dragons. But for the other, Annihilate would kill them. All Annihilate and Poliwrath would kill them. So it's just like, yes, when you look at sort of Registeel's 23 and 21 record, sure. But look at the wins, right? You got against like the stuff that's weak to Electric, the Charmers, and the stuff that takes Super Effective from fighting. But then look at your losses. Everything that I just mentioned. All the Mud Boys kill you. Fighters, Medi, Poliwrath, Annihilate kill you. Clodsire, which I said was one of the Pokemon that's like probably the best ground Pokemon because it neutralizes the grass, kills you. Lantern, Trevenant, that's going to come back up. It's just like so many. There's your meta. Like it's tough for me to look at those Pokemon and be like, again, they still have play. Don't get me wrong. They still have play. But again, there is the play against the meta that encapsulates 50 plus Pokemon. And then there's play against the meta, which is the 10 to 15 Pokemon that you're going to start seeing on every single team moving forward. And they don't really have play against that top 10, 15 meta. So what do I expect in 4 weeks? In 4 weeks, everyone's going to have their rankings. Everyone's going to have tried out these Pokemon. And you're going to see the 10 to 15 Pokemon that I just mentioned multiple times. I'll say Crest. So Crest, Lickitung, Quagsire, Gligar, Skarmory, Feraligatr, Lantern, Mandibuzz or Mantine can argue as the flyer. Whiscash, some sort of dragon, fighter, and Annihilate. Gallade. Maybe some Stunfisk, but haven't seen much of those. And that's it. And then again, the dragons I already mentioned. It truly will be concentrated in these top 20 Pokemon. So just be aware of that when you are thinking about team building or core breaking, because that is what you will see. Anyways, that is it. Just wanted to get those thoughts out there. We'll have a number on team this afternoon, and then we'll do top teams for Spring Cup and Ultra League tomorrow. But that is it. Thanks for watching. Let me know in the comments below what you think, like Pokemon, if I like missed one that has really risen that you think I should use, or it's underrated, or stuff that's just like maybe worse than you think, than I think it is. Let me know in the comments below. Anyways, that is it. Thanks for watching. See you guys in the next one.